Howdy tubers, welcome back to the Zach Life. So we are heading over to the lease that is actually the one well that I did. It's like the 7-year-old well that still kind of flows. If you hadn't watched it, I'll put a card up there you can click on, a link in the description. But anyway, we actually, right previous to the video of me talking about that well, the well had a tubing leak, and we had to have them back over there and clean out some trees where we get a rig on it. And we did a workover on it. It had been down about 6 months because we've been waiting on a rig and it wasn't really a priority to us. And anyway, while we had a rig on it, I was over there looking, and the separator actually had a hole rotted in it. It had a hole that was 8 plumb through it, and the separator isn't all that old. I can't remember, had a date on it. But anyway, I had a welder come out there and cut the end off the separator, put a new end on it, and then had some a company that does coatings come out, and they sandblasted the inside of it. It all looked really good except the one end, and had it plastic coated. It's all put back together. When we did the workover, the well started making a little bit more oil and water. It used to not hardly make any water, especially if you just ran it every 3 or 4 days. But now it makes about 10 or 15 barrels a day you start it. And then if you run it every day, it's making 2 or 3 or 4 barrels of water. Anyway, my water tank's only like 40 barrels, and of course you can't fill it all the way up or empty it all the way with a truck. And so it's 35 barrels of working room, and the well's making enough water that this is becoming a pain. And also, it doesn't cost any more or less to haul more or less water. You're just paying for the truck. The disposal really is more or less free. And anyway, there's an extra oil tank here, and what we're going to do today is go see if we can get this oil tank rigged up good enough to use as a water tank. And it's a good tank. We hadn't used it in forever. There's just not a need for it. It's just not used. It hadn't been used since I've been around. And anyway, we're going to go see if we can get it hooked up. Need to work on the separator. Got some poly welding to do, some other stuff, and whatever. Anyway, it's around the corner up here. I'll catch you when we get in there to the well. So kind of give you a bird's eye view of what we got going here. The far tank is a pretty new tank. It's about 10 years old. It's a 300 barrel tank. It's the only tank that this lease will ever need. There'll be no use to have more storage than that oil tank. It'll hold you know, plenty of, you know, extra month or 2 of oil if it rains or whatever, can't get a truck in here. There used to be 2 of these smaller tanks, or 210 barrels instead of 300, and you have to use both because you've got to have basically one of them brim full to be a truckload of oil. Anyway, the far tank actually got a pinhole in it. We got scared of it and hauled it off and bought a new tank. And then this tank we had about a decade ago. A company came out that does fiberglassing, and we had the back pulled off of it and it cleaned out, and it actually looked good. It didn't have any holes in it, but we had it fiberglass the bottom up to a foot or so. It's got a fiberglass layer in it, or whatever you would call it. Anyway, 8 or 10 years ago, this has got a stupid manway hatch on it. I'll get to a minute. And we tried to put it on, and we couldn't keep the stupid thing from leaking. We gave up on it and just used this tank. Most tanks have got a bolt-on hatch like this. This is a pretty big one. A lot of times they're not that big. They just got a gasket around that bolt on. This has got like a rope seal, and we'll show you in a minute, but it's kind of stupid. But anyway, I need to change this connection. That's 2-inch. We need 3-inch for the tank truck, just because they could gripe about it if it takes them forever. We need to change that. We need to work on the separator. Almost all separators except this one, and we're fixing to put one in, you've got an oil dump valve. So here's the oil dump valves. Now all these are is a back pressure regulator. They set the pressure behind these valves, and so that would be the pressure on everything: the separator, the flow lines, the well. These advanced flows suck, and that's all I'm going to say about them. They work okay if you've got a lease that is real consistent. Like I've said, this well kind of kicks off and flows. It'll make a bunch of oil real quick. And these don't react nearly as fast or as well to pressure changes. And they cause the pressure to be really high when you start the well, and then be, you know, close to zero after it settles down. These big Kimrays are much better. Problem is these are 300 bucks and these are about 1,000. So normally we'd have that back pressure regulator in the oil dump, on the oil line right here. This is a line that takes the oil up and dumps it in the tank. In this particular situation, I got away without having one because the water tank is so short that it takes more pressure to push the oil up into the oil tank than it did the water into the water tank. And so if this valve is open, instead of the oil going in, the water just travels via gravity over there. Now, since I'm going to fixing to hook up this, use this water tank, we're going to go over the top. It's going to take quite a bit more pressure to get the water up over the top. Now, we're just talking about a few PSI, but nonetheless, we've got to have that few PSI. Now, I'll probably set this regulator up to be like 8 or 10 or 12 pounds, something like that. Probably about 10 pounds will be adequate. You only need enough pressure, as I say, to get the water up to the top of the tank and in the tank. So the first order of business is I've got all the pressure relieved off this. The well is off. I'm going to break this out. We're going to put the oil dump valve in and go from there. It's got a bolt that screws in the top of it. You screw this down to increase the pressure. I think with a bolt all the way out, you can just, where it touches there is just about 10 pounds. So the next thing is I got to break this out. This is a 4-to-2 bushing, and I think probably when we use this tank, it probably had a 2-inch valve here, and about 10 or 12 years ago they started grafting about 2 inch. It made us go to at least 3-inch, and I have a feeling that we've tried to get this out before and couldn't, and that's why it ended up like this, partially disassembled. So I bought a big wrench and I got a cheater. I'm gonna see if I can break this out. Then we'll put a plastic coated swedge and a ball valve. Oh yeah. Might wore me out. All right, I know this isn't the best angle, but the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this valve out. So there's a valve here and a nipple that goes back to about this far in the tank. In fact, you can see it right there. And this is how you clean the tanks. These oil tanks, when you use them, they'll have water and basic sediment and crap that ends up in the bottom. And if it ends up more than a foot, the truck companies won't pick up the oil because they don't want the crap on the bottom. They want the good oil. They have to clean the tanks. And anyway, these valves are used to clean the tanks. On newer tanks, they're usually in the side at the very bottom. These are at the very bottom, and they actually do work better for cleaning the tanks, but they don't. They're hard to get to, and the connections are always in the dirt, and they have a tendency to leak and get rotted out. Anyway, I'm gonna dig around this and break this out, and I don't need this valve anymore, and I just got a PVC plug I'm gonna screw in the bottom of the tank. It's always kind of nerve-wracking sticking your hand under these tanks because you don't know if there's a rattlesnake or what under there. Luckily, all this stuff's coming out. Usually this is a nightmare. I've been dreading this, but it's actually going to all come out. There it is. Truthfully, that all looked pretty good. It might not have been that old. All right, so here's this stupid thing. It's got this plate and this rope gasket, piece of rope seal, I guess, goes in this groove. And this plate goes over that hole, and then it's got a nut as a spacer, and then this plate goes over this plate like as a big, to spread the load out evenly. And then this thing goes up against these two pieces of rebar and screws up against this back plate. I cut the audio out of this. The wind noise was so bad it was unusable. This all went pretty well. Just drove the piece of rope there into that groove, and put red RTV all over everything I could, and I got it all lined up and tightened it up. Hopefully it will. Hopefully it'll work. So we just cranked the well up. We'll let it start pumping up and pressure the separator up. We can set the oil dump valve. I want to poly weld a connection. I'll kind of explain in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and crank my poly welder up. I used to have a nice American made one and it burned up. And they're like 500 bucks. I bought a cheap Chinese one, and I think that it's actually a 240 volt heater. And they just, or probably 220, and they just put a 110 plug on it, 120 plug. And it just barely gets hot enough. You got to wrap it up in rags as insulation. It's supposed to be like 1500 watts, and it doesn't pull near as much power as it's supposed to. Anyway, I'm gonna go start my generator, get my little iron to warming up. All right, so what I'm gonna do is just drop a piece of poly pipe down in the hatch of this tank. We'll run it to where it's pretty close to bottom. We don't want the water falling through the air because it'll aerate itself and make iron oxide and other nasty things. But anyway, I'm just going to run a piece of poly pipe down there pretty close to bottom, a couple feet off bottom, come up with a T, over with a 90, and then point it kind of that away, right down there at the separator. All right, so while that piece of junk over there is heating up, let's see if we can set this oil dump valve. So we've already got fluid coming in because we got some pressure. I want to set this about 15 pounds. That ought to be just about perfect for 12 to 15, ought to be just perfect for pushing water up that high. Anyway, I'm just going to start screwing this in. By the way, I've cut the water line loose and just shut this valve here, and we'll deal with this spinning around here in a minute. But I'm just going to start screwing this in. In fact, I'll just shut that valve, and we'll just sit here and let this thing pressure up. All right, I think this thing's just about warm enough to do a weld or two. I usually work really hard to clean this stuff up. Considering what it's going to be, it's not under any pressure. It's probably not really critical. So we're going to put a T down in the tank and then a 90. I'm going to put a T here because if you don't have this vented, this line will fill up with gas and it'll try to float the poly in the tank. I'm just going to weld a piece in here and then maybe stick a soup can or something over the top of it. So here we are. You just take the welder, go like that, let it sit here and melt a couple of minutes. A couple of minutes, like maybe 30 seconds, something like that. Pop it out. Shove it in there, and there you go. Like that. See if we can get one more done. Yeah, it's still 270 Celsius. I had to learn what Celsius, what the numbers were in Celsius. This one's probably pretty too cool. Pretty much too cool. It's taking that separator forever to pressure up. It's up to about, looks like it's about 10. I was trying to show you a video here of the thing stuck in the tank, but I got a still picture by mistake. But anyway, there is a picture of the water leg dropped in the tank, and it zings out there to the separator. So this will be nice. I can just take that clamp off and cut this and put this poly right on that KC. All right, in the meanwhile, we're up to about 18 or 19 pounds. I think these are rated for like 60, but like I say, probably about 12 to 15 is be what I want. I'm just going to start backing this off until we hear it open, which is actually already. See the pressure falling. So then about like that, that'll probably stabilize about 12 or 13. I can make a small adjustment to it as needed. So I'll put out a separator video if you'd like to understand how these work better. I can put a card up there, link in the description, whatever, you can find it. But there is a float in here that floats in the oil, or excuse me, floats in the water, but sinks in the oil. It floats in the transition between the two. And so when the water level comes up, when this thing pumps enough water to get the water level up, the float will float up. It's connected through a trunnion right here, and this will cause this to go down. So when the float goes up, this goes down. Now if we push down on this, we can simulate, you know, a high water level, and by pushing down on this, we'll open this valve. But pushing this down opens this valve, and you'll be able to hear when I open this the water roll in the tank. Of course, when we let go, it returns to its, you know, shuts the valve. After this runs for a day, this will sort of be in equilibrium. It'll just be, you know, holding pressure back. The hold up valve will stay partially open. This will stay cracked open. We'll probably try to show you that tomorrow. All right, so we're back over here. It's Monday morning. The separator should be in equilibrium. We can check the pressure, which is about 12 or 13. Look at the water level in the sight glass. I usually like it a little more up here, but that's not a problem. Make sure we haven't got anything leaking. It probably made, it's probably got maybe about this much water in it. That's about how much it'll make the first day. Let's go up the tanks, take a look at it. I don't know if you can see down in the water leg there. It's just a little trickle. Got a little oil dribbling in there. I'll gauge it in a minute and see what it made last night. Anyway, everything looks good. It's a little wet there, but I think that's what came out of this hose when we cut this hose off yesterday evening. Anyway, appreciate you watching. That's about the size of it. I thought that was going to be an afternoon project. It actually ended up turning into a 3-afternoon project, or I guess one of them was just today. We wanted to put the back on the tank. We wasn't over there very long. But anyway, it was down a couple of weeks, but like I say, that weld sort of makes us hold back. In fact, what was it? I gauged it. So it was 5'3" on the 10th, and it was 6'5" today, the 24th. So it was down 2 weeks exactly. And so that would be 12, 14 barrels or 14 inches, and it's 1.66 barrels to the foot. So that would be, let's see, a foot would be 20. So it's made about 23 barrels last night, which is comes out to a barrel a day if you calculate out the you know, over 2 weeks, something like that. It'll make a little bit better than that if you run it every day. Somehow at this moment in time, in my head, 23 divided by 14 is 1. But anyway, I rattled on long enough. I'm sure y'all are sick of looking at me. I got another project, fixing to start another video here in just a few minutes. Got another one coming. Appreciate you watching. Catch you on the next one.